Florence Cathedral is the main term used to describe a complex of buildings, including the cathedral, the baptistry, and the campanile. This complex has been added to over the years, so nowadays anyone who tries to learn about the cathedral will probably, like myself, give up trying to understand all the different artworks piled on top of each other. So I've decided to make this video to try and make it as clear as possible, so I hope you enjoy. Florence Cathedral, also known as the Basilica di Santa Maria del Fiore, was built on top of an ancient cathedral from the 4th century, and this was dedicated to Saint Reparata, who was a 3rd century Christian martyr. It was built to accommodate the growing population of Florence, as the 5th century church was too small. The cathedral itself is located in Piazza del Duomo and has 4 main features. The first feature is the exterior, also known as the basilica. In 1296, the cathedral was designed by an architect called Arnolfo di Cambio. The exterior has polychrome marble panels. Polychrome is when marble or other materials are painted on in architecture. In the case of the cathedral, the marble is green and pink with white borders. So the marble underneath was probably white and they painted over it using green and pink. There are also 2 entrances to the cathedral. On the north side, you have the doors of the mandorla, and on the south side, you have the doors of the canonici. The second feature is the facade. So this was designed by Di Cambio, as he designed the rest of the cathedral as well. However, it was never actually finished, and the facade we see today was designed by Emilio di Fabris in 1864, so 600 years later than Di Cambio's first designs. It is neo-Gothic in style, and the polychrome marble continues round from the main body in order to contain a harmonious appearance. As you can see in the picture, the facade is split into 3 vertical parts, each with huge bronze doors. All these bronze doors depict scenes from the Madonna's life. Above them are what we call lunettes. These are semicircular indents from any type of masonry filled with art, and these were designed by an architect called Niccolo Barabino. And then above these lunettes we have triangular pediments. The side portals, triangles, are smaller to accommodate rose windows above them. The main portal has a much larger triangular pediment because it has its own rose window in the extra level above. This triangular pediment depicts an enthroned Virgin Mary to continue the theme of Madonna's life throughout the cathedral paintings. On top of all of these 3 is a long line of niches, and in these niches we have the 12 apostles with the Madonna and Child in the centre. In the other niches around the facade are busts of Florentine artists, which is a lovely touch. The third feature is the campanile. The campanile is a large, freestanding tower you can see on the right next to the main facade, and it is sometimes known as Giotto's bell tower. This is because it was designed by Giotto di Bondone. It houses 7 bells and is 85 metres high. It also continues the polychrome marble around the cathedral complex. Unfortunately, Giotto actually died after he had only completed the bottom level, which features green, red and white marble. The architect of the south doors, Andrea Pisano, continued Giotto's design exactly as Giotto would have wished. However, with the Black Plague in 1348, he stopped. This is what I mean by the Florence Cathedral being confusing. It wasn't until 1359 that Francesco Talenti completed the bell tower, so it took 3 architects to complete this bell tower. However, this architect did not stick to Giotto's plans, who wished for a spire with which the tower would reach 122 metres, but instead Francesco left it flat. Today, though, you can actually walk up the tower and experience the best views of Florence. Now, the 4th main feature is the interior. Arnolfo di Cambio also did the design for the inside of the church. He planned 3 main sections, which are known as naves. All 3 naves lead up to an area just before the altar, which is under the dome. Now, after Di Cambio died, the designs changed hands several times, as already explained with the campanile, and most of them did stay true to his idea as it was carried out. Namely, the architect just mentioned, Giotto, was appointed in 1333, and he designed the campanile. Now, when Francesco Talenti continued Giotto's designs on the campanile, he also changed the designs that Di Cambio had for the inside of the church. He enlarged them and included the apse, which is at the front, and he created side chapels along the side naves. Now, these side chapels are sort of large-scale niches, often with mini altars devoted to various saints. Around the cathedral are many artworks honouring great men of Florence, for example Dante, Niccolò da Tolentino, who was the commander shown in Uccello's Battle of San Romano, which was a previous video I did a few weeks ago, and I will link it down below. Now here's a bit of a tourist tip. As you walk into the cathedral, turn around, because behind you, above the main door, is a huge clock by Uccello with portraits of prophets, and it is extraordinary. It's also extraordinary as it only has one hand and shows the 24 hours ending at sunset. And this is a timetable that was used until the 18th century. So it's incredible that we can still see this. The altar is depicted to San Zanobius, who was the first bishop of Florence. It was designed by Lorenzo Ghiberti. In the centre, the artwork depicts one of his miracles, where he revived a dead child, and the altar contains an urn of his relics. And then above the altar is an artwork of the Last Supper, and this was painted by Giovanni Balducci. And then just above you, before the altar, is the inside of the dome. Now, the inside of the dome was originally supposed to be designed with a mosaic. Cosimo de' Medici had the dome painted with the Last Judgment instead. He commissioned it, and it was finally completed in 1579 by Giorgio Vasari and Federico Zuccari. Then, starting from the top down, the circles depict the 24 elders of epoch, choirs of angels, Christ with Mary and saints, virtues, gifts of the Holy Spirit and beatitudes, and lastly, capital sins and hell. Now, the dome also changed hands many times. You will remember Arnolfo di Cambio began to rebuild it in Gothic style in 1296. And then, as you know, it exchanged hands many times, and it took almost 150 years for the old cathedral to be completely rebuilt. In 1418, the Arte della Lana arranged a competition for the dome to be erected, which Brunelleschi won, with Lorenzo Ghiberti as his main competitor. The dome was finally finished in 1436. 150 years after Arnolfo di Cambio, and it was the largest dome in the world until very recently, actually. It is still the largest brick dome at 45 meters wide. Filippo Brunelleschi and his team built the dome without any temporary supporting frame, which would have been unthinkable at the time. It was also the first octagonal dome, most probably inspired by the Pantheon, which is a circular dome with support structures, and Brunelleschi would have seen this when he visited Rome. Now, I feel at this point I could split this video into two because it's so long already, but we're going to keep going. So, finally, the Baptistry. The Baptistry is the octagonal building which is part of the Florence Cathedral complex, and this is dedicated to St. John. The exterior of the Baptistry has the same polychrome marble decorated as the rest of Florence Cathedral. The first floor level has 3 arches, each containing windows, and it is the same across all 8 sides. Similarly, on the second level, every side has a small window within a 3-part panel. The Baptistry is probably most famous for its 3 doors on the north, south, and east side. The north doors were completed in 1422 after 21 years of work by Lorenzo Ghiberti. There are 28 square panels on the doors, the top 20 of which depict scenes from the life of Christ. The bottom 8 are of the 4 prophets or evangelists, and the church fathers, who are St. Ambrose, St. Augustine, St. Jerome, and St. Gregory. Surrounding these panels are busts, prophets, and sibyls. Additionally, surrounding the actual doors is a framework of foliage. Above them is a bronze statue by Francesco Rustini, which depicts St. John preaching to the Pharisee and Sadducee. The south doors were designed by Andrea Pisano. They were completed in 1336, after it took 6 years for the bronze casting and gilding to be finished by Leonardo da Vanzano. These doors consist of 28 square panels as well, the top 20 of which depict scenes from the life of St. John the Baptist, to whom the baptistry is dedicated. The bottom 8 are the virtues, which are charity, faith, fortitude, hope, humility, justice, prudence, temperance. In 1571, Vincenzo Danti designed a bronze statue which sits above the doors and depicts the beheading of St. John. The east doors were named by Michelangelo the Gates of Paradise. They were designed by Lorenzo Ghiberti, who completed them in 1452 after 27 years' work, and his workshop included Michelozzo and Benozzo Gozzoli, who later became very famous in their own right. The panels on these doors are slightly different to the other two. Here, rather than 28 square panels, they have 10 rectangular gilded panels. Each panel depicts stories from St. Joseph's life, not St. John this time, but they all show more than one episode in the panel. These east doors were sculpted after the other two, and it is actually the most celebrated of the doors. This is because Ghiberti here uses many new sculptural techniques, where the individuals in the panels are practically freestanding, which was an extraordinary feat. Similar to the other two, the doors are surrounded by a foliage framework, and the panels are supported by busts of prophets. This is the interior of the baptistry, and it's divided into 2 levels. The ground level has columns supporting the first floor, where you can walk through. The inside is also decorated in a similar way, but not exactly like the polychrome marble of the exterior. Here there is more gilding than white, but a similar dark green is used. This provides a continuity throughout the building, which is lovely. On the floor, there are very complex marble mosaic patterns of shapes, particularly octagonal shapes, and this is in a similar way to the dark green. It just echoes the design of the exterior building. And there is also an octagonal font. And a fun fact is that the Italian poet Dante and many other very notable Renaissance figures, including members of the Medici family, were all baptized in this baptistry. One other thing that you might be wondering is, why does this have an octagonal design, and why do so many features feature the octagon? The octagon is a very common shape for baptistries since very early Christian times. The number 8 is a symbol of regeneration in Christianity, signifying the 6 days of creation, the day of rest, and a day of recreation through the sacrament of baptism, hence why it's used often for a baptistry. What's also interesting is that I think nowadays people place more importance on the Florence Cathedral in terms of the complex of buildings. However, given how much time between the 14th and 16th centuries was taken and the level of artistry that was given to the baptistry doors, it gives an indication that the baptistry at the time was at least equal to the neighbouring cathedral in importance. And this is also relevant considering the Medici family baptised their family members there rather than the cathedral, which is just interesting to think about. And then lastly, the ceiling of the baptistry has the most incredible mosaic ceiling. The earliest mosaic pieces date back to the 13th century, and this mosaic cycle, starting from the inside out, the ceiling depicts choirs of angels, the Genesis stories, stories of St. Joseph, stories of Mary and Christ, and lastly, stories of St. John the Baptist, to whom the baptistry is dedicated. In the two sections either side of the large depiction of Christ are scenes from the Last Judgment. On Christ's left are the damned, and on his right are the saved. I really hope that you enjoyed this video and found it useful. I have written all of this information up on my website, which I will link down below, so don't worry if you're writing it down. And I hope it wasn't too long and that you understood, and let me know in the comments if you have any other suggestions of videos that you'd like to see.